In the beginning of time, when the world was still in chaos, God created two sea monsters, Leviathan and Behemoth. Leviathan was a gigantic creature with scales as hard as steel and a mouth full of sharp teeth. He was an emblem of chaos and destruction, and his mere presence terrified humans. Traditionally, Leviathan has been seen as a representation of evil, often associated with the devil or the Antichrist. This interpretation is based on the biblical description of Leviathan as a formidable and powerful sea creature, making him a metaphor for dark and chaotic forces that oppose God and divine order. The book of Genesis mentions that God created the great sea monsters, among which Leviathan could be included. However, according to the Talmud, a collection of rabbinic texts, God also created a mate for Leviathan, but killed it and kept it to feed the righteous in the future. For if the Leviathans reproduced, the world would not be able to withstand them. The Talmud also says that God created Leviathan on the fifth day of creation, and that he did so for entertainment. In the book of Job, Leviathan is described in more detail as an imposing and fearsome beast that no one can tame or catch, and that spits fire and smoke. God speaks to Job about Leviathan to show him his power and wisdom, and to make him see how insignificant man is before his works. In other sections of the Bible, such as Psalms and Isaiah, the image of Leviathan transcends that of a sea monster. These texts show him as a divine creation, a manifestation of God's power and majesty. This dual representation, fusing terror with the divine, illustrates the intricate and profound relationship between human beings, the natural world, and the sacred. In the book of Psalms, God is said to have broken the heads of Leviathan and fed them to the sea turtles, which could be an allusion to Baal's victory over Lotan. It is also said that God plays with Leviathan, and that he created him to entertain himself. Some of the verses that mention Leviathan in the Psalms are the following. Thou hast broken the heads of Leviathan and hast given him for food to the people of the deserts. There walk the ships. There is this Leviathan that thou hast made to play in. Leviathan in the Jewish tradition has deep and complex roots. In the Talmud and the Midrash, central texts of Judaism, Leviathan is described not only as a gigantic sea creature, but also as part of divine creation. According to these sources, there are two Leviathans, male and female. God, fearing that their reproduction could destroy the world, kills the female and preserves the male for a feast to be served to the righteous at the end of time. This creature occupies a prominent place in Jewish eschatology. It is believed that, in the future, in the Messianic era, there will be a great battle between the forces of good and evil. As part of this narrative, Leviathan will be defeated by the Messiah or a great hero, such as the Archangel Gabriel. This battle represents not only the physical, but also the moral and spiritual struggle between these opposing forces. Likewise, Leviathan originates in Ugaritic mythology, an ancient Semitic culture that inhabited the city of Ugarit in present-day Syria. The Ugaritic worshipped a pantheon of gods, among them El, the supreme god and father of all gods, Baal, the god of storm and fertility, and Yam, the god of the sea and chaos. According to the Ugaritic texts, Yam was an oppressive and violent god who wanted to impose dominion over the other gods. To do so, he was aided by Lotan, a seven-headed monster who served as his guardian and weapon. Lotan was a giant sea serpent with sharp scales, flaming eyes, and fiery breath. His name means coiled or twisted, and he was considered a force of evil and destruction. Baal, the god of the storm, opposed Yam and Lotan's plans and decided to challenge them in an epic battle. Baal was the most famous god among the Ugaritic people, and was associated with lightning, thunder, rain, and life. His name means lord or owner, and he was considered a hero and a king. The battle between Baal and Yam is narrated in the poem of Baal. This Ugaritic text recounts the adventures and conflicts of the storm god. This poem describes how Baal confronts Yam and Lotan, using his powerful voice, bow, arrows, and magic mace. Baal defeats Yam and Lotan, smashing their heads and bodies and freeing the world from their threat. In doing so, Baal became the new king of the gods and built his palace on Mount Staphon. The legend of Baal and Lotan inspired the biblical story of Leviathan, which appears in several books of the Old Testament. The Hebrews adopted and adapted many elements of Ugaritic culture, including its gods and myths. Thus, he became God's generic name, Baal became Yahweh's rival idol, and Lotan became Leviathan, a mythical creature representing chaos, evil, and final judgment. Leviathan appears in several books of the Old Testament as a sea creature that embodies chaos, evil, and final judgment. Its name comes from the Hebrew Leviathan, which means coiled or twisted, like the Ugaritic Lotan. Some scholars believe Leviathan is an adaptation of the legend of Baal and Lotan, which the Hebrews met during their contact with the Ugaritic people. The Book of Job contains some of the most famous verses about Leviathan, such as the following: "Canst thou draw out the Leviathan with a hook or cord that thou castest on his tongue? Out of his mouth go forth coals of fire, and flames of fire leap forth. He shall make the path to shine after him, so the abyss seems gray-haired. Heat is the first of the ways of God. He who made him may cause his sword to draw near." In the book of Isaiah, it is prophesied that God will punish the Leviathan, the swift serpent, and the crooked serpent, and slay the dragon in the sea on the day of judgment. This verse is as follows: "In that day shall the Lord punish with his sore sword, great and strong, Leviathan, the strong serpent, and Leviathan, the crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon in the sea." Leviathan appears in Jewish mythology and religion, and has been interpreted in other cultures and beliefs, giving it different meanings and symbolisms. In Christianity, Leviathan is associated with Satan, the dragon of Revelation, or one of the seven princes of hell. He is considered the demon of envy, who corrupts men with his temptations and leads them away from God. Some medieval authors describe him as a considerable fish or whale that devours sinners and ships. In Christian literature, especially in medieval and Renaissance texts, the Leviathan is a formidable adversary that must be defeated by Christian heroes or divine intervention. This representation underlines the belief in the continued presence of evil in the world and the certainty of its ultimate defeat. For example, in Dante's Divine Comedy, Leviathan is mentioned in the context of hell, reinforcing its association with sin and doom. In Gnosticism, Leviathan is identified with the Ouroboros, a tail-biting serpent that encircles the world, separating the material realm from the divine. It is seen as a manifestation of matter, evil, and ignorance, preventing knowledge of truth. In the Kabbalah, the Leviathan is one of the four sacred beasts, along with the eagle, the lion, and the bull. It represents the element of water and is associated with the Sephirah of Yesod, the foundation. It is said that the Leviathan will be sacrificed, and its skin will be used to make a tent where the righteous will celebrate the Messianic banquet. In literature, the Leviathan has inspired several writers, such as Thomas Hobbes, who used it as a metaphor for the state in his political work, Herman Melville, who compared it to the whale Moby Dick in his novel of the same name, and H.P. Lovecraft, who included it in his mythology of the Primeval Ones as one of the most potent cosmic entities. Throughout history, the figure of Leviathan has transcended its origin as a mythical creature in ancient texts to become a cultural icon that has been reinterpreted in multiple contexts. From its representation in art and literature to its presence in theological and philosophical debates, Leviathan has maintained its place as a powerful and mysterious entity that arouses fear and fascination.